Hi guys, very good evening to one and all. So I'm Akshay Bharadwaj, I'm corporate lead with Simandhar Education and I'll be your host for today. So in this meeting, we have two lead instructors for CPA globally and nationally. That is Mr. Peter Olinto and Mr. Sripal Jain. So let me introduce Mr. Peter, who is a national instructor at Becker and a global lead instructor at Wiley. He has over 2 decades of experience working with Becker, and he is very well known for his innovative methodologies to make concepts clear. So Peter always believes in 3 P's for achieving anything in life, that is passion, perseverance, and patience. So, and the best part of Peter is that if he wouldn't be a CPA, he would be a DJ. So thank you for coming on here, Peter. And
thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes. So let me introduce to my favorite instructor and all-time student favorite instructor of India, Mr. Sripal Jain, who's the co-founder.
Wait a second. Hold on.
You can't do that.
I'm not your favorite? I'm not your favorite? I gotta go. I'm shut off. Bye.
So he's the co-founder of Simandhar Education, and he himself is a CPA, and he has over more than 7 years of experience working with corporate, and he's been awarded as the best edupreneur of Telangana. And he himself is a visiting faculty for many of the IIMs and the B schools. So in the short span, Sripal has achieved a lot, tying up with all the corporates, giving them all the training needs for CPA and CMA. So thank you, Sripal, and thank you, Peter, for coming down and taking time for our students. So before I move ahead, I want to give a big announcement for all the audience out there. So the announcement is related to a quiz part, wherein all the audience would be taking part of the quiz, and one winner would be getting Becker sponsorship for their CPA training and guaranteed placement from Simandhar Education. So this is going to be a very big thing, guys. So I request all the audience and attendees to take active participation into this and win this opportunity. Thank you, and it's over to you, Mr. Sripal. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you so much, Peter Olinto, and we have Aziz also from Becker's Professional Education. And today's session is more about the Q&A, about the frequently asked questions on the US CPA, and that's how we would be starting off with. And we have a good counseling team there, Anuya, Kaivalya, Radha, Kalpana there, who would be helping you out. If there are any questions on YouTube, who all are watching us live, and please put up your questions on the YouTube, on the comments chat, and we will be keep answering there as well. And here also, if you have any of the Q&As, please raise your hands, and we would be keep clarifying your queries. So the theme is more about the CPA study strategy, the CPA process as such, and more to do with the new evolution of the CPA 2024, which is coming up, where the future of the profession is getting changed, and a lot of things which are the exciting things coming up. And again, in this session, the most important part is the scholarship. And I think I and Peter will keep motivating you to attend those quizzes and all. And whoever wins that would definitely get all the fees waived off. I repeat that again, the entire training fees is waived off for that candidate, whether it be Samantha or Becker. So I encourage everyone to participate in the quiz, which will be going on, and ensure that you attend the session from start to end. And we'll be covering up a lot of the questions on CPA, on various stuff, whether it be on the registration, exam, and all those processes. Right. So I'm glad to have Peter with me today. And Aziz, do you want to speak up something before Peter starts? Aziz, are you able to hear us?
Hi, Sripal. Hi, everyone. Good morning, evening. No, not much to say. I think, we've got, as you said, we've got the two superstars of CPA training globally and in India here. So I think I would just say it's a great opportunity for everyone. Please make the most of it. Get all those questions answered, because you got two people here who know everything. At least they think they know everything. But I'm sure they do. They're going to answer all your questions. Make the most of it. That's what I would say. Make the most of it. You've got the best of, Becker and Samantha here. And thanks for taking the time here as well. I know it's in the evening, Dashara and everything going on as well. So I'm so glad that everyone's taken the time out for this. And this is your careers at stake. So don't leave this session without getting your answers to all your questions. Thanks, and again, thanks to the Simandhar team for putting this great event on, and for Mr. Olinto for finding the time for it.
I'll start things off with a question. Aziz, why don't you have your camera on? Did you not shower? What is the issue? Why is your camera not on? Did you not comb your hair? What happened? Oh, there we go. Oh, turn it off. Turn it off. Big mistake. You were right. All right. On that note, guys, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm excited to be here today. A lot of you I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and it's always great to kind of see you all virtually. I guess I can't see most of you, but thanks again. And we're here to answer all your questions. I am not the international expert, though, insofar as the registration process goes. I get a lot of those questions through LinkedIn, and this is a great opportunity. So if you're concerned about how you go through the entire registration process, it does vary a little bit candidate to candidate, depending upon your background and what kind of credits you have that will be accepted in the US. So a lot of those questions we're happy to take offline. So if it's specific to you and your particular college credits and what have you, and what state might work best for you, given your particular circumstances, who would we send those questions to, guys? Who would they email so that they can get their unique questions answered offline?
So meanwhile, Anuya, I think we can put that up in the Q&A window, and you can keep answering there on the eligibility and the evaluation and all those things. Okay.
Sure, sir. I'll take it up. And just to start off with the first question, there is, this is from a lot of students that we come across. So there is one question that is repeatedly being asked by the students. So how long the exams are going to be conducted in India? So what is your answer for it, Peter?
I will defer. So in India, Sripal, you'll take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. That's more of a process related question. So guys, I've been in US, spoke to AI, CPA and NASBA, and I can confirm that the exam in India is permanent. And there was a notification also that the CPA exam in India will be on a continuous thing. So every month the exams will be conducted in India except Saturdays and Sundays, right? So we can't have exams on Saturdays and Sundays. So apart from that, every month the CPA exams will be conducted, and the exam in India is permanent, so you can plan accordingly. But sooner or later, one needs to enroll and one need to register and complete the exam. That is what we encourage a lot of the professionals, and that's what we would kind of advise. That would be the first answer for everyone. Yes, the exams will be conducted in India in 2022, 2023, and so on, and it is permanent. Parul, so that would be the answer for you. I've checked that in the Q&A window. Thank you. Thank you, Aniya.
Thank you, sir, for answering it. And the next question, how difficult is CPA? How much time will it really take for a common student to clear it? Common student in the sense, especially a BCom graduate. This is the most repeated question asked by a BCom graduate.
Peter.
Yeah, so we give an average amount of time per part. So I'll start with financial accounting and reporting. For the most part, that tends to be the most challenging of the 4 parts of the exam because of the volume of information. So we generally recommend our candidates plan on for their study schedule about 120 to 150 hours to properly prepare. Again, that varies though by, well, what kind of grades did you get? Let's say in intermediate and advanced accounting. If you were a C student, probably going to be putting in a little bit more time. If you were an A student and you're a recent college graduate, maybe a little bit less time, but that 120 to 150 hour range is what we find most common. You need to be mindful that while Becker's called a review course, it's kind of sort of a review. There are certain topics that for one reason or another, you may not have seen. For example, state and local governmental accounting. Even in the United States, there are a lot of candidates who have never had a class in governmental and not-for-profit. So, you know, the first time you go through those lectures, you're not actually reviewing anything. You're actually learning it for the first time. So you should put in your study plan, you know, the second time you go through it is where you're really doing your review. I'm also going to recommend that for financial in particular, that you do cumulative reviews along the way. So the Becker book has 10 chapters. I like to recommend that every 3 chapters or so, before you move on to the next chapter, you do a cumulative review. You don't want to study something in week 1 or 2 and then not look at it again for another 2 months until you do your final review. So it's important along the way you build in those cumulative reviews. The second most challenging part would probably be for most candidates, especially international, is the regulation. Very specific to the US. So your background, a lot of times in international financial reporting standards, not gonna be very useful here. So it's very specific US tax law as well as US business law. There are certainly some similarities, but it's very specific, obviously, to the US. So you got to put in a little bit of time and effort there, along with the ethical requirements that are somewhat generic, but they do vary from country to country. So we usually recommend between 100 and 120 hours for the regulation section of the exam. I always tell people, if you have, if we go through your transcript and we see that you need additional credits to make yourself eligible, you really want to take additional classes in taxation. When the average person hears you're a CPA, especially from the US, they immediately assume you'll be an expert in tax. So you'll never regret having corporate taxation, partnership taxation. So that'll be a big help. But that 100 to 120 hours is generally where you'll be for that part. Auditing, interesting, is about 100 hours to properly prepare. The good news is, unlike financial and regulation, there's no math involved. The bad news is there's no math involved. I like math. It adds up or it doesn't add up. It's very objective in terms of why a certain answer is correct or incorrect. Audit's a kind of a gray area. And if you don't have a lot of work experience with audit, it could be more challenging than you would think. So even though it's all theory, don't underestimate the time and commitment you'll have to put into audit. I'll also recommend, in terms of the order in which you sit for the parts, they do in the US, the AICPA has made a concerted effort to reward work experience. They've made the exam such that it's more practitioner based, so that if you've actually been doing audit work, the audit section of the exam should become progressively easier. For that reason, I generally recommend, if audit's going to be what you're going to do, or you have work experience in audit, sit for that part last, because all that work experience and training you get will help you to prepare for that section. And if, God forbid, you've passed a part and now you're on your last part, you've passed your other 3, but all of a sudden you get very busy at work, the worst thing that could ever happen is you lose credit for something you passed first because you didn't get all 4 parts out of the way within 18 months after you passed that first part. You don't want to have that happen. So you'd much rather have it get progressively easier, especially if you're working full time. The BEC section of the exam is kind of generic worldwide. This is not really as much US specific content. So your corporate finance, cost and managerial accounting, it's not as in-depth or volume-wise have as much information. You got corporate governance, macro, micro, global economics. So it's probably 80 to 100 hours to properly prepare for BEC. So for many candidates, especially internationally, the one obstacle they'll have with the BEC, though, is the writing requirement. So if obviously for many of you, if English is your second language or you're not accustomed to writing essays, this is where the course will be very helpful. Samantha will show you how to maximize your points with the writing requirement, so that you don't have any issues with BEC. But content-wise, it's probably the easiest of the 4 parts, except for that writing requirement. Overall, you're probably looking somewhere between 400 to 450, maybe 500 hours to properly prepare. That was a long answer.
Thank you so much. But you have cleared so many questions, so many answers for so many questions with one single question that I've asked. Thank you so much for that. And the next question over to you, Peter, again. So what is the average salary that one student can get after pursuing his US CPA?
All right. So from what I've heard, it's somewhere around 3 or 4 million pesos. I think, quite honestly, if you Google that, it's really dependent upon the region where you are in the US. So somebody in Texas might be earning something different than New York City, which might be different from somewhere in Missouri. So it really is region specific. But, I think the starting salaries, gosh, you guys might know better than me. I'm going to say, I don't know, is it 70, 60, 70, 50, 60, 70,000 US? Is that sound about right to you all?
Thank you, but we are looking for you to help us with the Indian figure. What is the average salary can a student get according to the Indian?
Oh, Sripal, I'm going to have to defer to you on that, my friend.
Ania, I will take that up. So guys, you all have asked on the scope of US CPA in India and what is the salary. So the average package for a CPA is coming around 6.5 to 8 lakhs per annum. That is for a fresher. So that is a ideal salary in India, and in US, typically, as Peter said, that it would range around $65,000 to $75,000. Texas, normally there are no taxes as such, so it might go up beyond that. But again, guys, you need to consider that there are a lot of taxes in US. So you're back to Indian salary only there also. So it doesn't mean that you're earning $60,000, $70,000, and in India you're earning less. But then you have a purchase parity theorem which is going on, right? So net, you would be saving around what, 1 to 1 lakh to 2 lakh per month. So that's what we would say, but we will restrict our salary figures in India. So if someone asks me what is a CPA salary or what is a fresher's US CPA salary, would be 6.5 to 8 lakhs. That would be the range, Anuya, for this.
Thank you, sir. What if a student cannot clear CPA? What is the scope for them?
Sripal, I'll defer to you. In India, what are the job opportunities if you just have that degree in accounting, but not necessarily a CPA? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think that is what they are looking for. So why CPA? That is a good question in India, because normally if you want to go to the to the leadership level, you require a professional qualification, because I have not seen a graduate becoming a CFO of a big company. And it's not that I'm criticizing the graduates or the postgraduates, but the problem is the investors. Investors invest in a company where there are qualified, there are skilled professionals, because end of the day, I'm investing in that company. So I want to know whether the face of the company is a qualified person or not. And that's why a US CPA is very, very important. And even if you want to go at the leadership level in Big Fours, to partner level or to manager or senior manager level, US CPA is a very, very important qualification. A lot of the corporates even sponsor for CPA. And I would say, just if you're just a BCom, I think definitely it will not be sufficient. If you're a chartered accountant, CA dropout, or a CMA, or a company secretary, or various Indian qualifications, professional qualification which you couldn't complete. So I would say US CPA is definitely a very strong option to pursue. And the reason is you cannot go to the higher level without a professional qualification. So Anuya, I think US CPA is a mandatory thing, or any of that professional qualification for that matter, even Indian chartered accountancy also. But just a BCom or just a BCom plus an MBA from a tier 3, tier 4 colleges, it will not work out in the Indian markets, because right now the competition is more, and the companies are expecting that you guys need to be qualified professional in order to grow in the corporate ladder. Thank you.
There is one more question, sir, from one of the students. How easy for CA inter pass out with 10 years of experience? And what if he had 5 years of gap for his last exam?
So Peter,
does it really matter?
Do you want to take that up, Peter? How an experienced professional needs to study for CPA in case if they have a gap? So is there any tips for those professionals who are having, say, or I would say that they are starting CPA after a long period of time? That's what would be the rephrasing.
Yeah, so if you've been out of school a while, unfortunately, out of sight, out of mind. So if you're an auditor, you're probably not going to have seen a lot of the tax and vice versa. So, we do have a different study plan for people who are looking to go through the exam with having a long break. When you're working full time and you've been out of school a while, we generally recommend that you study for only one part per quarter. This way, if you spread it out, you can divide and conquer. So somebody had up there too about studying a couple of hours a day. When you're working full time, depending upon the job you have, you're lucky if Monday through Friday, if you could study an hour or two. you'll generally do the bulk of your studies on Saturdays and Sundays. So, for that 1 year period of time where you're studying, unfortunately, your weekends are not going to be as enjoyable, because you'll be putting in probably about 15 hours on the weekends, maybe 5 hours during the week. So that's about, 20 hours or so on average per week. If you do the math based upon what I said earlier. So if you do the math, like I said earlier, you're probably looking between 6 and 8 weeks to properly prepare for a part. So that puts you in about the one part every 3 months or so. So it's very doable, but you're going to have a little bit of a different study plan than somebody who maybe hasn't started working full time or is fresh out of school, where maybe they can look to get all 4 parts out of the way, in 6 months. Some people do it as, very rare, but in the States, it's not uncommon for someone to graduate in May. They may not start working until October. So a lot of those candidates in the US, if you're in a similar position, they do what's called a fast pass. So between May graduation and then starting work full time in October, given that they can study instead of 20 hours a week, about 40 hours a week, you can theoretically knock out all 4 parts during that summer before you start working full time. I will caution everyone who's working full time and thinks, well, Pete, I'm going to take off for 2 weeks. And I think I could do 150 hours in 2 weeks, and I'll study 70 hours, a week, 75 hours a week for 2 weeks. The law of diminishing marginal returns will kick in pretty quickly. What we generally see with most students, not all, but with most, if you're studying more than 8 hours a day, all of a sudden the value of that study time starts to drop significantly. So be realistic. Even if you're studying full time, we have candidates that'll study 4 hours, take a nice break, study another 4 hours. But anything more than that on a daily basis, your retention level drops. In addition, if you try to cram it in 2 weeks, you don't have the time to really, keep up and do the cumulative reviews. And that's where you put in a lot of time and effort, but you don't really have a mastery of the topics, so it's, just be cautious about doing it that way.
Thank you so much for that, Peter. So now that we have a good number of crowd here, I just wanted to give a little bit introduction of what US CPA is before moving to more number of questions asked by the students. With your permission, can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, Amia.
Thank you, sir. So basically, what is US CPA? US CPA is a US Globalized Certified Public Accountant course, which is equivalent to CA Chartered Accountant in India. So coming to the scope, it is administered by AICPA, which is an American Institute of Certified Public Accountant. So you basically have 4 papers to clear. One is auditing and attestation, business environment concepts, regulations, financial accounting and reporting. So these are completely online based examination where there is no much of theory into it. And the entire paper is of objective, like 50% of the paper would be MCQs and other 50% would be the descriptive questions, which would be in the format of MCQs only. It is called as stimulations. So a question, just wanted to address a question for Mr. Peter. So how do we tackle stimulations? How tough is it?
That's a great question. So as was just mentioned, 50% of the exam is multiple choice. The other 50% are more like long problems. So I'll give you an example. Statement of cash flow. An individual multiple choice question when it comes to that topic might ask you to calculate just the cash flow from operating or maybe cash flow from investing. So pretty easy to tackle as long as you know the rules with operating, investing, and financing cash flow. A simulation type problem, though, might ask you to actually calculate the change in cash. So there are multiple steps involved as you need to calculate your operating, your investing, your financing, net it out, get your change in cash. So even if it were an open book test, the simulations could be rather challenging because of the volume of information that you're given in the question. So you're going to have access, if you know anything about the statement of cash flow, you need to be able to look at the balance sheet. You want to look at your operating assets, your financing, your investing. So you got to have all the information about your balance sheet. Depending upon whether you're going to do the direct or indirect method, you're going to be looking a lot at your income statement as well. So you're going to get a full-blown income statement, and then you need to cherry pick certain pieces of the income statement. There might even be additional notes provided in the facts. There might be a sale of some property, plant, equipment where you need to back into the selling price, given, let's say, the gain or loss on the transaction, as well as what the asset was purchased for, its historical cost, and what the accumulated depreciation was. So you've got your net book value, you've got your gain or loss, you then back into your selling price, which is cash inflow from investing. So it's doable, certainly doable, but you really got to have a mastery of the topic before you start practicing simulations. Otherwise, it's very frustrating. So what I generally recommend to students is you watch your lecture. We're going to do sample questions. You initially get that introduction to the topic, but you got to crawl before you walk. So we'll do some basic questions to make sure you feel comfortable with the topic. When you do your homework, your practice questions, you don't go near the simulations. You first practice all the multiple choice. All the individual pieces of the puzzle, you'll get them one at a time in multiple choice so that you can build your body of knowledge. After you feel like you have a mastery of the subject matter, that's when you apply it at the highest level to the simulations. Then you can see, okay, I know the rules, but can I manage all this information they're giving me and organize my thoughts so that I can answer the various questions that are asked? So it's really just a problem. I would say it's a combination of 3 or 4 multiple choice lumped together. And that's what the simulations are for the most part, if they're math intensive. So you really, the homework is your golden opportunity to practice, to reinforce. But the simulations, it's very important. I can't tell you the number of candidates that will tell us, Pete, I did all the multiple choice. I felt so confident with the subject matter. So I didn't really feel like I had to practice the simulations because I was doing so well on the multiple choice. I figured I could just reason my way through the simulations. And even if you're, like I said, even if it were open book, you gotta practice the simulations so that you can, in advance, be able to organize all that information that's provided. We give you lots of simulations to practice. Getting it right sometimes is incidental in the process. You want to make sure you're reviewing rules in their entirety. You're never going to get a question that's exactly worded the same way as what you saw in the homework, okay? The questions are, it's not like when I took the CPA exam many, many years ago, the exam was a fully disclosed exam, which meant that after every exam, they would release all of the questions, and then you could just practice the old questions. And then oftentimes you would get, I'll call it lucky, that maybe 30 or 40% of the questions that I saw exam day were verbatim, exactly what I practiced, right down to the answer choice, letter C. I remember working a problem and recognizing it and say, oh, the answer C. That doesn't happen anymore. Today it's about application. Do you really understand the concept rather than just memorizing different formulas? The exams also become more analytical. So even in like financial accounting, like if it's a question involving ratios, it's kind of given that you can calculate the current ratio or the quick ratio or debt to equity. What does that really prove that you can do that math? It's if you see a series of ratios over a period of time, trend analysis, or you see a target company's ratio given to you compared to the industry standard or major competitors. Do you understand, is this company becoming, of greater risk, or are they becoming less risky, so to speak? Are they growing? Are they contracting? So it's really using the information and applying it rather than just memorization. So, a lot of candidates just, what do I need to memorize? And it's not just about, you need to understand the concepts. So it's very important that you're not just regurgitating or think you're going to regurgitate memorized formulas. I'm also a big believer. I've been through the CFA exams, the US bar exam. And what all these exams have in common is that volume of information that makes it so challenging. People say, well, how do you remember all this stuff? The more senses you engage when you study, the more likely it is you're going to be able to remember it and be able to apply it. So it's more than just reading or watching lectures. You've got to be interactive. I'm a big believer in making your own flashcards. It's great that we provide flashcards, but what you write, you're more likely to remember. So we're going to emphasize certain things in the lecture and the homework. It's a heavily tested topic. That's basically your cue to say, hey, I better make sure I understand this concept and write it down. Sometimes you need to speak it. So, if you're in a study group, sometimes explaining the concept to somebody else, the person doing the explaining sometimes gets a lot more out of that than anybody in the group. So when you hear yourself talking about it, somehow it resonates and it's gonna stick with you. Even if you're on a dating website and you're out on a date first time, talk to that person about pension accounting or maybe bond amortization. If that person you're having dinner with is still with you at the end of dinner after you talked about US pensions, that person must really like you, and that's probably your soulmate. Right?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So,
Uh-oh.
There's a lot of haha and lot.
I'm sorry, I've been on mute. So there is an interesting question for you from one of the students. Since there is a great transition happening from CA to CPA, how long will CPA have its boom?
Sripal, I'll let you take that.
Can you just repeat that, Anuya? I missed out that question.
Since there is a great transition happening from CA to CPA, how long will CPA have its boom?
I think that's something which is more of a futuristic question. Every profession has its own importance. So if you see that chartered accountancy has its own respect in India and US CPA has its own respect. So we just can't compare both the qualifications, I would say, because Indian chartered accountancy is there and it's an Indian qualification. So end of the day, you need to practice in India, you need a chartered accountancy. So I don't think so that we can compare that with US CPA as such, because both are different qualifications. But at the end of the day, if someone wants to go in the employment and all, and if the question is more that would there be more job opportunities after we finish CPA, then the answer is definitely yes. Because we are seeing a lot of US companies coming to India, and Peter would be very different to that thought process, but we are seeing that many of the US companies now, a lot of the outsourcing is happening to India, and that's where the job opportunities are more in India as I compared to US, because in US nowadays the people do coding and all, and not much onto the accounting stuff. And that's where I think AICPA believed that they have to bring technology into their curriculum. And that's what you're seeing in the next 2024, the syllabus which is getting changed. You have technology also added into the curriculum, right? So I would say that CPA profession is here to stay. And the main reason for that is the US companies. You can tell that if US companies themselves don't exist, then I think the US CPA qualification also won't exist, but that would not happen. And Peter, what is your views? Would the US CPA qualification stay here, or how is it?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up technology, and I saw one of the questions in the chat. The US exam is definitely testing a lot more IT and data analytics. So what a trend we see in the United States is a lot of people who are tech majors in school, the accounting firms are aggressively recruiting them. There's a thought process. It's easier to teach the accounting to a tech person than to try to teach the technology to an accountant. So if you have a background in technology, data analytics, as they change the exam in 2024, but even right now, there's greater emphasis in your understanding of IT and data analytics. But Sripal, I actually have a question for you, because I get this all the time on LinkedIn. Just to clarify, if you take the US CPA exam after becoming a chartered accountant in India, the AICPA, the United States, there's no state that waives any parts of the 4 parts, right? Even though you're a chartered accountant in India, they don't give you any credit. They don't waive any of the 4 parts because you're a CA. Is that correct?
Yes, so they don't give for any of the exams for that matter. Even CFA also doesn't give any exemptions. I think the question which you get on LinkedIn is more from the students who are pursuing ACCA. Because in ACCA, what happens, Peter, is that they give a lot of exemptions. Out of 13 papers, 9 papers are exempted, 7 papers are exempted. So many of the times they ask that question whether this particular thing will give me exemption or not. So if you're a CFA, if you're a billionaire, millionaire, you need to write all the 4 exams of CPA. That's how I would say. So there's no exemption whatsoever for anyone.
Excellent. And I know that one of the questions I get a lot online is picking the state to get licensed in. I will tell you, in the United States, legally, the state you get licensed in is of utmost importance when you start to get to the point in your career where you're a senior manager or a partner and you want to lawfully sign off, you want to attest, and you want to sign off as a CPA, you have to be licensed in that particular state to lawfully do that. It's not like a federal, a national credential. It's really a license granted by the individual states as opposed to the federal government. So the state you get licensed in initially isn't nearly as important. Even in the United States, a lot of people move around, right? So you might go to school in one state, live in another state, move. So the question we get a lot is, picking the state you get licensed in is really, especially internationally, dependent upon your transcript and your background and the credits that you have. So you have some flexibility as to finding a state that might be a little bit easier for you to qualify initially to be eligible to sit for the exam. Your employer probably has a lot to say about that as well, but that's where the expertise of Sripal and his team to help you find that state. In addition, once you pass the CPA exam, but for whatever reason, you're licensed in Texas, but you want to get licensed in New York, there's something called reciprocity between the states, such that it's more of a formality in filling out paperwork and paying fees as to opposed to having to resit for the CPA exam. I've actually never met anyone that's ever had to resit for the exam. It's possible, but insofar as I know, once you're licensed in a particular state and you've got work experience in that state, and then you want to get licensed in another of the US states, it's a formality for the most part. So you don't have to worry about transferring or getting that reciprocity for the most part.
So it works a bit differently in India, Peter, because they have an agreement signed. So every candidate who's writing the exam in India and in Dubai need to sign an exam kind of agreement with AICPA that they will get their license within 3 years. If they don't get their license within 3 years after they pass the CPA exam, people who are watching us live, I'll repeat that again. If you don't get your license within 3 years after you pass your CPA exams, your scores will get lapsed. So states are very, very stringent on that, and you would need to write your CPA exams again. I mean, till now, states haven't enforced that rule, but they do take that undertaking and they do take that contract signed. And the reason behind that is, Peter, we are seeing a lot of the licensed CPAs getting retired in US, and AICPA and NASBA is thinking that they might fall short of the licensed CPAs, and that is one of the reasons why they want to bring that rule of licensed CPAs for people internationally. And that is why we are very careful on telling them which state board they are eligible for. And that's where you see Anuya, Kaivalyas, Kalpanas, Annapurnas there, who are there as a big support team for kind of helping them to know which state board they are eligible for. And later, if they want to change the state board after they pass the exam, we can definitely do that. And they can get the license on which state board they want for. Right now, just for qualifying, we tell them that by seeing their mark sheet, we tell them that they are eligible for this state board. And then later we kind of keep changing that state board in case what they want. But again, the rule doesn't undergo a change. They need to apply for license within 3 years, else their scores get lapsed. And that's why it is important that they go to an institute who has a good knowledge of evaluation, of licensing, to check whether the co-founder himself is a CPA or not, because we see a lot of the institutes of CPA run by a person who himself is not a CPA, who is not a licensed CPA and might not sign on their work experience. So in our case, I myself a licensed CPA. So we have a licensed CPA team who can kind of verify and attest their experience and all those things. So that's where it is a bit stringent and tough in India. So all the transcripts, all those things are asked in India, but nothing for US, right? So in US, it is more relaxed rules. But for internationally, I think it's really tough that they need to get their eligibility and everything correct, because else they will land up in a big trouble actually.
So if you pass the CPA exam in India, when does your experience requirements start to count? So in the United States, if you have work experience before or during while you're sitting for the exam, that will count towards your work experience. For students from India, can they get their work experience only after they've passed the exam, or does work experience prior to taking the exam count as well?
I think it is both prior and after. So even if they have done that, and even articleship experience is also considered. So in our chartered accountancy or ICAI, which is cost accountancy of India, normally they have an internship concept. So that also is considered for some of the states as a good experience. They might not consider full experience of internship. They might award half a year of internship. But any experience, a full-time experience before CPA or after CPA, that experience is considered for licensing, and I normally sign that experience unless and until there is something very scratchy. They might not work and they are showing their work experience wrong. So we ask them to produce the HR letter to just understand that whether they are licensed, whether they are working in that company or not. Once they kind of give that evidences, we normally sign for that work experience and they get the CPA license.
Do the employers from the US prefer a particular state for the candidates to be licensed in? So if you work, let's say, at the Big Four or Global 7, do they have a preference, or do they leave it entirely up to the candidate to choose the state that they get licensed in?
That's a good question. So we have actually tied up with Deloitte, EY, KPMG, PwC, all the Big Fours. So we do kind of do the training for the Big Fours also. And what I understand from the Big Four leadership team is they're not really bothered about which state you're registered with. They just want that you pass the CPA exam, that's all. And after that, you can always change the state board by doing some additional credits and all. But the first process is that they pass the exam. So normally they ask Simandhar to kind of tell the state board which they are eligible for. Later we have a bridge course, Peter. So if they don't have sufficient credits, we do have a bridge course where they can enroll and get that additional credits and get that license also. But for Big Fours, it is not important that they get license from that state board, because now we have the mobility agreement signed between the state boards. So if I am a licensed CPA from Montana, I can practice from any other state board and all, and I can sign for it. Some of these state boards, like tougher state boards, they do require that you should have that state license only. But remaining other state boards are much flexible. I would say on a count of 10, at least 8 state boards have signed that mobility agreement where the US CPA, licensed US CPAs from any state are recognized all over the states.
And that's for India students. That's the agreement they have with India.
Yes, yes. So for all the international candidates and all, except few state boards which require residency requirement, if they are, if they are resident or not, or if they are a citizen of that country or not. So there are certain states which are excluded in those things.
See, these are all the little details that are really country specific. So the agreements they have with the state boards, as well as the AICPA for when the exam is offered. This is that local expertise that you can only get if you're on the ground. So that's great. I'm glad you guys provide that guidance and insight for your candidates. It's invaluable. I can't even keep straight in the US for US candidates because every state is a little bit different. So Becker in the United States, we have people that will tell you specifically, here's the rule in New Jersey, which could be different than New York or Connecticut. So varies from state to state and then obviously country to country. So that's great that you provide that. I see a lot of people asking about Canada too. So do you place a lot of students just in the US, or do you place them in Canada and other places as well?
To be honest, actually, we have been placing in India. There's 100%. So we are 100 out of 100 in that. Like our results, normally it is 97, 94 pass percentage we see. But on the placements, I think it is 100 out of 100. So we have been placing across whoever have passed US CPA from Simandhar Education have been placed successfully in India. We did place one of the candidate in US, and that was provided they have a valid work permit, Peter. So if they don't have the visa or the EAD, so I don't think so that we can place them, because as per the US rules, they should have the visa of that country. So we normally don't misguide any of the candidates, because we are very crystal clear when we tell that if they do a CPA and they'll get a work opportunity in US, it doesn't happen like that, because they need to have their skill sets. They need to convince the employers. They need to work in Indian Big Four for a couple of years and then ask the partner or request the partner to make them shift to another country. So they need to prove their mettle. It's not so easy to get a job overseas. I know for you in US, because you're in US, so it's very easy. But for an Indian candidate to go to US and get that, there's a lot of science behind that. So either they need to come on a study visa and study there and do an internship after CPA, and get a job there parallelly, or they must have an EAD. Like in Anju's case, she had a valid EAD. So I just happened to speak to BDO US leadership team, and I placed her straight away at, I don't want to disclose the remuneration, but it was over $75,000. So per annum. So that's how we do it. But in India, I think we don't need to depend on anything because there are not much visa restrictions, travel restrictions as such. So it is very easy to place because we are tied up with all the top 20 accounting firms. So
wonderful. That's great.
There is another question from one of the student, Apurva sir. I'm a CA intermediate student. From last few attempts, I'm not able to clear my CA intergroup 2. My marks are 145, 148 from last few attempts. So she have already enrolled for US CPA. So she's just seeking for your advice whether she should go with US CPA first and then go with CA intermediate, or should she first complete CA intermediate and then come to US CPA?
I mean, this is a very difficult question, Peter, because I hold the qualification of both the accountancy, right? So I have a chartered accountancy, I have a US CPA. My request would be, if you're not able to clear chartered accountancy, you should definitely go for CPA. And if you're not able to clear any examination, especially after multiple times, like 3-4 attempts, there is a tough thing which you need to take, and the choice would be to kind of move from CA to CPA and pursue CPA and pass that confidently. Right. And after you pass and get placed, you can study for CA till lifelong. I mean, who is stopping you? Because if you see the Indian Chartered Accountancy, and the US CPA, right? The Indian Chartered Accountancy is more rigorous. It is of almost 4 years. You have internship, and there's a lot of things, a lot of subjects, a lot of stages in Indian Chartered Accountancy. CPA at the same time is only four paper exam. So it's not so stringent in the way that kind of test you or drill you. So the burden of remembering is not more in CPA, I would say, except for F8, F9, F10, Pete on governmental accounting. And I wish that you teach those 3 chapters, because so that is 3 chapters which you have. The burden to remember is more. But apart from that, the CPA qualification, you don't have much to remember as such, what you have in the chartered accountancy. So I would say for people who are not repeatedly able to pass the CA exam, I would take a pause and kind of do CPA, get a job, and then keep studying for CA. I mean, no one is stopping us. And that's where I think we kept an ad on LinkedIn that we would give them a placement guarantee. We would kind of give them discounts. And the reason was not to tell that CPA is very easy. The reason was to tell them that CA is very rigorous. So because you have gone to a very hardworking attitude, so CPA is not so kind of testing you that you need to study 17, 18 hours like you study in your chartered accountancy. In CPA, as Peter said, that even 4 to 5 hours of quality study and you're done with the exams. So it's more to do with the way they test you. And I think in that way, I would say that better to do with a CPA and then go ahead with CA. That would be there. And yes, again, no experience, nothing. You don't need any work experience in order to crack the CPA exam. What you need is an attitude to study. And every day, like Peter said, that 4 hours, 3 hours of quality study. And I think you should be done with the course within 6 to 8 months. That's what I would say. Peter, do you want to add up to that on the difficulty of the CPA exams? How would you rate?
Well, I can compare it obviously to the CFA exams and the US bar exam. Yeah, I think the major difference I see is that for the bar exam in the US, you can't practice law unless you pass the bar exam. So it's unlike you can be an accountant without being a CPA, you could be in finance without being a CFA charter holder, but you're not going to practice law unless you pass the bar. So interesting, what I see what that does is the incentive, the motivation. So no one's going to go 3 years to law school in the United States and then not pass the bar exam. It just doesn't happen. So there's a different level of intensity and motivation, and that's why the passing rate tends to be much higher. So I recommend for the CFA students that I teach and CPA students, you need to look at that exam like the law students look at the bar exam. Because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it, right? So I think having a degree in accounting is not going to provide you the same opportunities, whether it be job-wise or financially, as someone with the US CPA. So it really takes your opportunities to the next level and gives you the most flexibility. I will say that one of the things about the CPA exam that has changed for the better is the ability to divide and conquer and sit for one part at a time has made, in my opinion, the CPA exam much more doable relative to the CFA or the bar exam. So the CFA, each level one of the CFA to me is comparable to maybe 2 or 3 parts of the US CPA exam. Why would you take 2 or 3 parts at the same time when you can divide? So somebody actually asked, what 2 parts do you think I can sit for or study for simultaneously? My first question would be, why would you want to do that? There's no advantage to combining all that. You're diluting your study time, and you're going to decrease your probability of passing the individual parts by trying to study for all that simultaneously. But if there were a reason, let's say you're up against the 18-month window. So in the US, after you pass the first part, and I presume in India it's the same way, you still have, right, just 18 months to clear the remaining 3 parts, right? So if, let's say, God forbid, you have 2 parts left and you're about to lose credit for one of the parts you've already passed, then you might want to study simultaneously. But I will tell you that you never in the US do I ever recommend studying for financial and regulation ever at the same time. It's hard enough to keep all the financial rules straight. And then you got US governmental and not-for-profit, where the accounting rules for revenue and expenses are different than for-profit. And then when you account for revenues and expenses under the Internal Revenue Code for tax purposes is totally different than what you do for-profit accounting. So you never, ever want to study for regulation and financial simultaneously. I generally recommend the order in which you sit for the parts, as I mentioned earlier. I think in India, right, you teach them LIFO accounting and FIFO, right? They learn that. Do you guys teach them HIFO? HIFO. HIFO stands for hardest one in, first one out. All things being equal, financial is going to be the most challenging of your 4 parts for the most part. You generally don't want to leave financial to last. You'd rather get that out of the way first. If you say, Pete, I'm really good in accounting and debits and credits, I understand the accounts, then I would say get regulation out of the way, because the tax, you're less familiar with the business law. Leave the easier parts to the back end so that if, God forbid, you're pressed for time, you could cram theoretically for audit if you're an auditor. You're not going to be able to cram for financial or regulation for the most part. So harder parts on the front end, easier parts on the back end.
And
Thank you so
just
much.
a follow-up question. Sorry, Ania.
No problem.
Just a follow-up question to that, Pete, because this is one question which keeps coming up is, for a Big 4 candidate, for a person who's working in Deloitte, DY, or KPMG, or PwC, or even the Grant Thorntons and BDOs, because they have their busy season and all. So what would be your strategy for them? How do they design their study plan? What should be their first section? And because they have a busy season, so I just want to kind of ask that how should the sections be planned, whether it be FAR, audit, reg, BC, or how is it like, assuming that they start off with say November or say October. Today, any Big 4 guy register with Simandhar Education. So what should be the order of their study strategy?
Well, I think it's got to be by the time you have available, right? So financial and regulation, for the most part, let's say, assuming you're not doing tax, so you're studying regulation and financial, you want to study for those parts when you have the most time available. Ironically, for people who are in busy season, Sripal, you mentioned earlier, whether it's US or India, you want to do well at your job. And it's very stressful during busy season, and nobody, your senior, the manager, the partner doesn't want to hear you can't get your work done because you're studying for the exam, right? So you don't want to hurt your job performance. So if possible, you'd like to just focus on work during busy season so that you do well at the job and you quite honestly don't have a lot of time to study. But if you were going to possibly entertain the idea of doing a little bit of studying while you're in busy season, then I would recommend, I would say, what are you doing for a living? So if you're doing audit all day, every day, and then if you had to read about audit in your spare time in busy season, that's not going to hurt your job performance. You'll actually improve your job performance because you're reviewing and studying audit for the CPA, which actually might improve your job performance and vice versa. But if you're an audit person during busy season, you got no business studying for regulation and tax because it's totally not what you do for a living, and it could distract you from your job performance. So, really, for the most, I think if you do tax, you want to read a little bit about taxation regulation while you're doing taxes, I would say, okay. If audit during busy season, you want to do some reading for audit, that's okay. But don't study from outside your area of expertise during busy season. It will be very frustrating, and I don't see a lot of benefit coming from that for most candidates, quite honestly.
So I think just to put it up is that you plan audit and BEC guys in your, I would say, busy season time, and non-busy season, you would want to spend more time, right? So I think Apurva's question was there, what should be the order? So if you have more time, then I would rather spend on FAR and regulation because they are more in volume. If you see the number of chapters in FAR, it is 10 chapters, and regulation, it is 8 chapters. So technically, both the papers should take more time. So if you're a Big Four professional, you would rather give on your non-busy season or your off season, you would rather plan FAR and regulation, and audit and BEC, you might plan it in your busy season. I mean, I can't tell that because you can, I know what time you guys log off, right? At morning 4 o'clock, but it's just that even if you can take out time and study, I would say that are the 2 sections which you can knock off during your busy season, I would say. So BEC and audit and FAR and regulation would be off busy season. Right. And I think the same question on the order of the CPA exam, I would not say that there's not much order. Whichever subject you are much interested, start off with that. But yes, FAR is the most voluminous section, and I think most of them should start with financial accounting reporting. But again, there is a difference of opinion that you might still start with a section in which you are more interested because you want to pass with a section which you like, right? Rather than a section which you have no idea for. So that would be the thing. So some of them can raise hands, and Anuya, we can just unmute some of them and they can kind of ask questions if they want.
Sure, sir. Before that, I see students are waiting for that announcement, which we have done in the beginning of the session. So should we really move on to that part?
I think we can take few questions. Akshay, I'm fine with that. Pete?
Well, I wanted to show, I think, if there's a regression model, because a lot of people want to gauge their probability of passing, right? Like, so what would increase my chances of passing? And they ask, is there a significant relationship between probability of passing and any independent variable? I would use this simple regression model to help you understand your probability of passing. So I don't know if you could see this. Can you guys get that? You should regress your probability of passing against happiness. The relationship is inverse. So the more you're studying and the more miserable you are, the higher your probability of passing. You guys see that? It's a short-term investment in time and effort and sacrifice. There is certainly a sacrifice, especially when you're working full-time. But remember, you don't have to do this for multiple years. For the most part, you're going to get this done within a year. So for that 1 year period of time, you are going to be working very hard and you are going to be very miserable. But when you're very unhappy studying all the time, your probability of passing goes way up. Just remember that, okay? So, but it's a short-term sacrifice. You don't have to do this. You get it over with, it's done, and you'll have that credential the rest of your life. But for that 1 year period of time, it is going to be difficult. You're going to be sleeping less, probably going to the gym less, probably showering less. Who has time to take showers? Do you want to smell good or be a CPA? You got to get your priorities straight.
So we have a question, Pete. Anuya, I'm getting married in US, so I think I'm not able to study much. Peter, what is your answer for that?
Yeah, why are you getting married? Do you realize if you get married before you get the CPA, that's marital property in the United States? If God forbid this marriage doesn't work out, half of the value of that CPA license you're going to have to give to what will be your ex-spouse someday. Get your priorities straight. Come on, man. Boyfriends, girlfriends, husband and wives. You know what the synonym for that is? Distraction. We don't need distractions. We are your relationship until after you pass the exam. Then you could find somebody else. Don't cheat on us. Be loyal to us. Come on.
Guys, I think you got the answer, right? Distraction.
So there is another question for Peter. Just give me a minute. can you shed more light on data analytics and the job opportunities engraved with CPA course in US? Is it a kind of automation of audit procedures? Any example would be helpful for us.
Oh gosh, I teach every part but audit. I have the distinction of being the world's worst auditor. So I am, but I will tell you, you really should Google and research. We don't have a lot of time. It's a totally separate seminar, but the 2024 US exam, the major changes that they're making are incorporating a lot more data analytics and IT. But I think, and Sripal, you could probably shed a lot of light on this. I don't know if you have a separate presentation on the 2024 exam, but that is where the exam is going. So there's going to be very similar to what we have today, multiple parts of the exam. But the bottom line is right now, IT for the most part is tested in BEC and audit. The new exam come 2024, the IT and even data analytics is going to be incorporated to all the parts of the exam because it's becoming so important today. The job opportunities, again, being in India, different than the US market, but you really want to Google what those job opportunities are. And I could tell you the US CPA firms are aggressively recruiting people with the IT backgrounds and the data analytics because of its importance, not only on the CPA exam, but obviously in the profession itself. Sripal, anything to add on that?
I think the data analytics is something which is getting tested, and that is more to do with the, I would not say more on a detailed analytics, it is more about visualization as such. So just the basics of data analytics and visualization is something which is getting covered, like some of the tools of Power BI and Tableau and all those things. It's just more about the introduction, not much about practicality, which is getting tested because it's just the initiation of the technology which is getting added there in the curriculum. So from 2024, you might see, as Pete said, that it will only be tested in BEC 1 and 6 and much more to do with an audit. So already they have done that in the June month of this year also. So some of the part of data analytics is already getting tested, right? But from 2024, you will have an option to select BEC into different subjects. So they have just divided BEC into 2-3 parts, and you can select a section which you want. So it's more of a selective based, or I would say you can pick and choose your subjects in BEC. Suppose if you want to go more into IT, you can select IT subject, and then the other 3 subjects remains the same. So far audit regulation remains the same, but BEC will be getting splitted into 4 parts from 2024, and you will be given an option to select tax, SOC or IT related stuff, and you can select one out of them and pursue your CPA. So that's where they want to kind of target the people who are more passionate. They should select that subject and go ahead.
Thank you so much for that, sir. And there is one more question for you, Sripal, sir. Any guidance for masters in USA with CPA that we do? So can we go to USA for masters and do our CPA there and have 3 years of work option?
I think the answer is definitely yes, because you do have an OPT which is given for 3 years, but that is more towards normally the STEM program. So what is STEM, right? Science, technology, and all those things. So here, typically in US, they consider those candidates as more relevant for them, and they give them a 3 years OPT. But for accounting candidates, normally you are given 1 year OPT. That is like you can work along with your study. Right, so that's where you need to ensure that you select a STEM program which is with accounting. So if you want to do a master's, you would rather do a master's in analytics, accounting and analytics. That's where you can get a 3 years OPT, and you can work also along with your studying, and you can recover your cost. So that's how I would say that along with master's also you can finish CPA, and I think there's no reason why they can't do that actually.
Thank you, sir.
And there's actually one question I want to address. Somebody had in about IFRS real quick. The US CPA exam used to incorporate IFRS into the financial section of the exam. Currently, it's been removed. So your understanding of IFRS, there's a lot of overlap with US GAAP, but it's those differences that are going to get you on the exam. So really, they want to make sure you understand US GAAP. So ironically, where there are significant differences between US GAAP and IFRS, the wrong answer choice is going to be to use the IFRS rule to account for a particular transaction as opposed to the correct US GAAP rule. So they're more likely to test the differences to make sure international candidates in particular have studied the US GAAP rule. So IFRS, quite honestly, where it used to pay dividends, now you got to be very careful those differences between US GAAP and IFRS, and you got to make sure you're applying specifically the US rule, not the IFRS rule. CFA exam is very different. So anybody who's sitting for the CFA, the default rule on the CFA exam is to apply IFRS, not the US CPA exam.
So, but just to kind of add that, Peter, so guys, you don't need to kind of get worried because most of the IFRS have converged with US GAAP. So if you see that IFRS 15, which is ASC 606, which revenue recognition, right? So revenue leases, 842 if you see of leases, and IFRS 16 of leases. So much of the standards have been converged. Financial instruments is converged. The new insurance standard is much more similar of US GAAP and IFRS. So there are not many differences also, to be honest. But yes, I think, Peter, the lot of content has got reduced from far. So my classes are going at a very good pace, which it used to go before, right? So now that the content of IFRS is completely reduced, I think they have more chances to pass far, I would say, because they use
Yep. You just want to be careful that you're applying because it might be ingrained in you, the IFRS rule, but where there are still differences, that's a great way to write a question to make sure international candidates have actually studied the US GAAP rule and are not merely relying upon their IFRS knowledge. So they might be relatively small and that's like studying old outdated material. I always get, well, Peter, somebody has materials from just a year ago. Isn't that recent enough that I can study from last year's? Absolutely not. Even though 95% of the content may not have changed, when there are changes, you could be assured that the 5% that has changed, you will be penalized for having studied the old rule because now it's very likely the new rule will be tested. And God forbid you fail the exam with a 73 or 74 because you studied an old outdated rule. So the same logic applies to the IFRS. While the vast majority of the concepts have converged, there still are material differences. So where there are differences, you better make sure you know the US GAAP rule for the US CPA exam.
Sripal, there is another question for you. Does Simandhar really help with job opportunities in USA and Canada?
So again, I think we already clarified that. And once more, I just want to clarify that on the Canada front, because US front, I've already clarified that if you have a EAD or if you have a valid work visa, or if not a work visa, if you're a study visa also, we can put you under some internship and place you. But with respect to Canada, I think it's a very easier route. To be honest, Canada is more flexible. You can travel to Canada. The immigration is very easy. You just need to ensure that you write your IELTS exam and get a score of above 8. And along with that, if you have a US CPA and if you're a licensed US CPA, you might get a Canadian CPA also, provided you have a 2 year of work experience. So I would say work in India for 2 years and then switch over to Canada. I mean, that's a good route to explore and get the Canadian CPA also, because there is an MOU between AI CPA and Canadian CPA. So if you're a licensed US CPA, have 2 years, 30 months of work experience, you can get the Canadian CPA also, and you can work in Canada as well. But having said that, there are a lot of US companies in Canada also. So if you're just a US CPA also, you might have a lot of opportunities in Canada. It's just that you need to write your IELTS exam and apply for the fast track visa and go in for Canada, because right now after COVID, a lot of job opportunities, a lot of opportunities are there in Canada. It's just that you need to understand that just with a CPA, you can't move to Canada. You need to write that IELTS exam, the entrance exam, because they test you on your English skills and all. So once you write that, I think you can easily go in again with the master's route and explore the Canadian opportunities as well with the US CPA.
Guys, I have to jump off. I got to get ready for my next presentation, but I want to thank everyone for their attendance. I'm going to turn it over to our resident experts here in India. Thank you, Sripal and Samantha. Everybody, thank you so much for having me today. It's been great meeting all of you. Hopefully we'll see you in class. I want to wish you guys the best of luck. Please, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, keep me posted on your progress. I'll be rooting for all of you to pass, and I'll turn it over to you all. But thank you so much for having me. It's been a great time.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Akshay, if you can run that quiz which we kind of made
Sure.
that.
Zaki, can you please run the poll?
So guys, is everyone ready there? All are there in the attendees? I hope everyone is there. And
Yes, we do have good list of participants, I think.
cool. So hope everyone is able to see the screen. Just do a testing,
Just a
guys. And
minute.
I'll be
Yes,
there
please
actually.
drop in a yes if you're ready for the quiz.
All the very best to all of the students who are going for this.
Yes.
Would be great, Akshay, if you can also kind of narrate the question as well.
Sure.
Got it.
Ananya, do you have the questions on the screen?
Yes, I can see the questions. You want
Yes.
me to read out that?
Yes, please do.
Sure.
Thank you.
What is the purpose of information presented in notes to the financial statements? A, to correct improper presentation in the financial statements. B, to provide disclosures required by generally accepted accounting principles. Option C, to provide recognition of amounts not included in the totals of the financial statements. D, to present management's responses to auditor comments. Moving to the next question. Which of the following is a level 3 input to valuation techniques used to measure the fair value of an asset? Quoted, option A, quoted prices in active markets for identical assets. B, quoted prices for similar assets in active markets. C, unobservable input for the asset. D, inputs other than quoted prices that are observable for the asset. Moving to the third question. Which of the following items should be included in an auditor's report for financial statements prepared in conformity with another comprehensive basis of accounting? Option A, a title that includes the word independent. Option B, a sentence stating that the auditor is responsible for the financial statements. Option C, the signature of the company controller. Option D, a paragraph stating that the audit was conducted in accordance with OCBOA. Moving to the fourth question. Which one of the below factors is not included in the PCA or auditing standards as one that should influence the nature and extent of necessary planning activities? Option A, the size of the auditing firm and the number of auditors assigned to the audit. Option B, the size and complexity of the client company. Option C, the auditor's previous experience with the company. Option D, changes in circumstances that occur during the audit. Moving to the question number 5. Which of the following items would not be found in comprehensive income? A, non-monetary exchanges of common stock for productive assets. Option B, income from continuing operations. Option C, unrealized losses from changes in the value of available for sale securities. Option D, recognition of prior service cost due to pension plan amendment. According to the FASB conceptual framework, which of the following correctly pays a fundamental qualitative characteristic of useful information with one of its components? A, relevance and timeline. Option B, relevance and materiality. Option C, faithful representation and verifiability. Option B, faithful representation and predictive value. Which one of the below statements best describes the concept of materiality? Option A, information that is not likely to influence the decisions of a reasonable investor. Option B, information that meets strict quantitative thresholds. Option C, Information that directly impacts the income statement. Option D, information that is likely to be viewed by a reasonable investor as altering the mix of available information. Eighth question. Which of the following is an element of a CPA firm's quality control policies and procedures applicable to the firm's accounting and auditing practice? A, information processing. B, engagement performance. C, technology selection. Option D, professional skepticism. These are the 8 questions.
Thank you, Anuya. Zaki, did we get the polls? Guys, we'll give you 1 more minute and we'll end the poll. And
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Let's end. Yeah, the poll is ended.
Zaki, could you please share the details?
Just a minute. I'll just share the results.
Yeah.
I think you are now able to see the results, the polling.
So by the time we get the result, I request Anuya to take up 2 more questions, 2 or 3 questions until we get the results, right? Yeah.
I'm a bank.
Yeah.
Sripal sir, this is to you. I'm a banker with 21 years of experience in internal INTNL banks, and I'm into FP&A and audit currently. My question is CPA a wise decision to pursue further academic qualification and career opportunity in my case? I'm still in dilemma and skeptical to opt for it. Solicit inputs and direction in this regard.
Okay, so we have that person right now in the session, or how is it, like the one who have asked the question? Can we see him or is done? Yes, I don't think so. We have. Oh yeah, Amit Sarogi, right? So thank you, Amit, for asking that. And again, it depends on how many years of experience you have, Amit. So if we can unmute Amit there, if you can raise the hand. Amit, you can raise your hand and I would love to hear from you. Zaki, can you just unmute Amit? And guys who all want to kind of ask quick questions, you can unmute yourself. We are still there for another 10 minutes and we can take a quick rapid fire and close a lot of the questions. Yes, Amit, go ahead.
Yeah, Sripal, I have been working in Sebot Bank for the past 21 years. Started with Citi, HSBC, Stancy now,
Okay.
and I'm into FP&A and audit, right? I've done P&L preparations, balance sheet. I'm a BCom plus CA inter. So I'm still in dilemma, not just going with the age. I'm 41 now, but yes, I have I've gone through the curriculum and I think I can do it. But considering the quantum of time that I have to put every single day, it's like 12 to 14 hours being an audit, right? And it is sometimes 6 days a week. So will I be able to do justice? It's not just the money that I will be putting in. It's basically the return that I need in terms of some results for myself.
So Amit, first I would like to say that there are a lot of the leaders who have passed CPA from Samandhar. So they have been like finance heads and all those things, which where they are spending a lot of time on their work and they have a little bit of less time. And that's where CPA is helpful because if you see, I mean, there are only 4 sections. So
Yes.
as Anuya was mentioning, there are not many subjects like we have in CA final where you
Yes.
have to account eight subjects. Then in CA inter you have so many. So
6.
CPA you have only 4 subjects, right? So that's where it's kind of more helpful and you should be able to clear it off in 12 months, even if you study in 1 hour or 2 hours per day, that's all. So we are not expecting you to study daily 4 hours or 3 hours, but even with an hour, I think it should be fine. Only on Sundays or Saturdays, whenever you're having free time, you can triple that time. So say assuming 3 hours. So in a week, even if you take out what 7 to 8 hours, probably in a month, you should be closing with 30 hours. And 30 hours into 9, 300 hours. So 270 hours to 300 hours should be the average duration to finish the CPA exam. So that's how I would say, Amit. I don't think so you should have any problems as such. But yes, on your holidays and all, you might need to study a bit hard and increase the duration. But just that you're starting after a long period of time, you'll not be habituated to study, right? So here it's what we are trying to do is habit formation. So we are more towards processing rather than output or inputs. So your input is your study material and your CPA books, right? And then your output is you might pass CPA exam, but what about the processing to keep you motivated? So we keep a lot of MCQs in Telegram groups. So we have a lot of people who are enrolled with Simandhar. They can actually talk there in the Zoom chat there every day. Our team on FAR, Audit, Reg and BEC, they keep putting those 5 MCQs so that the working professionals or the students have that habit of solving the MCQs. Even if you know or don't know, that is a secondary thing, but just as a pre-assessment also, you can keep solving so that you are in touch. So how much time it takes, Amit? It might take more than a 10 minutes or 15 minutes of time to solve those MCQs which are put in the study groups. So that's the way you will get a good hold over the subject. And then finally, you can be able to pass. On the opportunity side, I don't think so that you can go to the leadership level, say at the CFO level without a professional qualification. So I think that is the only, I would say, a motivation because you have reached everything, right? It's just about going to the next level. And to go into the next level in other companies, as you know, unfortunately, qualification is very important. And that's where I think CPA might help you in that particular thing.
Okay.
Makes sense.
It does, Sripal. And does it also, well, I think that has been covered with regard to, say about seeking opportunities overseas and stuff. Well, that is covered anyway.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. So Apurva also have raised her hand. So Zaki, if you can unmute Apurva as well. Others, you can just raise your hands. We have 6 minutes more, so we can close out some of the queries if you have, and then we'll announce the winner because I know everyone is waiting for that. So till we validate our answers and all, you still have 5 to 6 minutes, so you can just go ahead. Yes, Apurva.
Hello.
Yes, Apurva, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Hello. Hi, sir. Apurva here. Hello.
Yeah, Apurva, go ahead.
Sir, I just want to ask, I have a lot of time for my evaluation process. Like it will take around.
I think we lost Apurva there. Sudhir, can we unmute Zaki?
Hello. Sir, I have a lot of time for my evaluation. I have a lot of time for my evaluation process. Like it will take around 3 months. So should I go with FAR should I go with FAR or should I go with the BEC lecture?
Yes, so I think, see, most of them ask that if they miss the classes, what would happen? They can always watch the recorded lectures because all those live classes are getting recorded, right? It's not a audio or a studio based setup, right? Where someone is just teaching and no one is asking questions. So even if you want to go in for the recorded videos, in case even if you have missed any of the classes, you can always watch that and get that speed. Now, having said that you have 3 months of time, I would definitely say that FAR is a better section to opt for because it's much more detailed. Like you might have seen Mr. Olinto also talking about that, because it's more detailed, it's more voluminous, and you need to spend a lot of time, right? So I would say you start off with that. But I have a difference of opinion here is that if you're really interested in that subject, which interests you more and which kind of makes you more happy, you should start with that section, because end of the day, it is very tough to start studying. The most difficult thing is to study, right? So I would rather, as an Indian, I would start with a subject, because we Indians are typically, right, much more lethargic and all to start off with, all bossy kind of attitude people. So normally we would not start off until and unless someone gives us a push, right? So I would say that start off with a subject which motivates you, which interests you more, like BC or audit or regulation. Start off with that. And once you pass that, you'll have that confidence and that habit which is going. So because what end of the day, what we are talking about is more about habit formations. So once you do a subject which interests you more, you would rather study more, right? It's same like a novel which you like, you'll kind of keep studying that novel and you'll never notice the time. So that's the power of concentration when you like something and study that particular thing. So that's what I would suggest, that start off with a subject which you love more, and like FAR.
Yeah, I have interest in the accounts.
Then definitely you can go ahead with FAR approval. Yeah.
So I think we got the results, sir.
Hello.
So
Okay. I have.
Sudhir, go ahead, please.
Sir, before we
Can I ask?
Yeah, right, sir.
So Akshay, let the results keep waiting. We'll just take more 2 questions and then announce. We still have 3 minutes. Okay. Yes, Sudhir, go ahead.
Okay, sir.
all right.
You see, I'm already in Canada and I'm planning to move to USA by next year or so. I'm a chartered accountant and a cost accountant. So I want to do US CPA. Can Simandhar help me, like which state to select and how to registration, all these things?
Oh, definitely, yes. We have over 3,000 plus students, Sudhir, and we have a lot of students in Canada also. So you don't need to worry. I mean, our team is there, like Anuya and all, so you can just drop in there and kind of contact our team. They will help you end to end. You don't need to have any issues as such there.
So I might be writing either in Canada or USA, so the examination, so that also you can help me.
Yeah. The exams are there currently in Canada, right? So they have not cancelled it yet. This exam center is still there in Canada. So they said that till June it will be, and they extended right now till November. So I think you will have the exam center there. You can definitely write the CPA exam there, but we don't know in the future what is the stand for Canada. But for India, we are pretty much sure that it is permanent.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Naman, go ahead. Zaki, can we unmute Naman?
Hello, am I audible? Yeah, hi, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I am doing fine. You need to be very fast because.
Yeah, so actually, I work as a US tax consultant in one of the big fours. So I wanted to ask, when should I study for reg? During the March busy season, I have 2 busy seasons, March and September. So what is more advisable? From in March should I study, or in September should I study?
So I would say that neither of the months regulation is more tougher, right? You'd rather study FAR or audit, audit or BC than regulation or FAR, because both are voluminous section. So I would rather avoid that in the busy season and study with an easier section like BEC and increase my confidence and kind of going for another section after the busy season, right?